Hello, and welcome to this special review prepared for our listeners. Today, we have a very ambitious topic on the table. The sources reaching us are based on a long and detailed conversation between researcher Mustafa Kurdoğlu and artificial intelligence. In this source, it is mentioned that the text of the Quran contains not only literary and spiritual layers, but also a cryptographic mathematical structure woven into its texture, one claimed to be impossible for humans to imitate. It is possible to access this source via Mustafa Kurdoğlu's website 7i19.com. Our mission is simple: to understand what these claims are, to peel back the layers of evidence, and to reveal this cryptographic structure with concrete examples.
It is crucial to start this topic from the right place because there is a lot of information pollution in this field. Usually, the starting point for such analyses is the theory known as the 19 miracle, proposed by the Egyptian-American biochemist Rashad Khalifa in 1974, following his studies on the Quran's text. Basically, the theory claims that the Quran possesses a divine mathematical code based on the number 19 that human intelligence cannot reproduce. Popular examples, such as the Basmala, consisting of 19 letters, or the Quran having 114 suras, which is 6 times 19, all stem from this theory. As a basis, it points to the verse, "Over it is 19," in Surah al-Mudathir.
Hold on a minute. Let's clarify this issue before we start. This 19 miracle theory doesn't have a very good reputation, does it? We know that it has faced serious criticism and has been accused of cherry-picking data to fit a purpose.
That is an absolutely correct point. Understanding why this theory is rejected by the vast majority of academic and religious circles is an important part of today's topic. The criticisms gather under two main headings. The first is methodological. Critics say that Khalifa selected data to suit his purpose and even altered data.
So like finding the result first and then inventing the rule.
Exactly. Finding a result first, then inventing rules that fit that result. Like sometimes counting a word and sometimes not counting it to make the numbers fit 19. It is alleged that Rashad Khalifa used arbitrary methods.
I understand. So it is said to lack scientific consistency. And what was the second criticism?
The second is even serious, a theological problem. Rashad Khalifa claimed that the last two verses of Surah al-Tawbah were added later and did not belong to the Quran because they did not fit his theory. Since this implies an intervention in the integrity of the text, it is found unacceptable by almost all Islamic scholars and deals a massive blow to the theory's credibility.
Well, since the original theory is so problematic, why are we still examining this topic? Because the sources we have suggest something completely different instead of repeating these old and refuted claims. These sources evaluate Rashad Khalifa's approach as numerology. That is, they view it as assigning mystical meanings to numbers. They argue that the correct method should be cryptology, the science of encryption or ciphers. So what exactly is the difference?
That is a great question. This is exactly the key point of today's review. Numerology assigns subjective meanings to data. For example, making arbitrary inferences like the count of this word in the Quran is a multiple of 19, therefore this means Rashad Khalifa is God's messenger. Cryptology, on the other hand, is completely objective. It looks for an encryption system in the environment. This system must have a key, consistent rules, and most importantly, an self-verifying algorithm. It's like an internal mechanism saying, "I am not a coincidence, I am a functioning system." The claim of our sources is in this direction. A much deeper and layered cryptographic structure exists in the Quran's text, purified of the flaws of the old theory.
We've made the distinction between cryptology and numerology, but let's take a step back and get to the foundation. How do the sources address the Quran's famous challenge to bring a similar one? Because isn't similarity usually a literary and subjective matter?
A very pertinent question. At this precise point, the sources focus on the concept of misl, meaning similar or like in the Quran. Their claim is quite clear. A precise measurement of similarity for a text can only be done through the measurement of its objective elements. The sources argue that to prove a similar text cannot be made, the complexity of this objective structure must be measured.
Let's expand on this measuring complexity issue. There's a very striking glass cup metaphor used in the sources to explain this. Imagine taking a glass and throwing it onto a concrete floor. The glass shatters into smithereens, isn't it? It's impossible to copy that moment. The exact location where thousands of pieces fell, the angle and the shape of each one, isn't it?
Yes, it is impossible. The sources call this chaos, meaning disordered confusion. This is a result that emerges the moment control goes beyond our consciousness, unimitatable but completely random. We don't look for a spark of intelligence here. There is only uncontrolled breakage.
But what if we examined those broken pieces with a magnifying glass and found perfect hexagons, perfect circles, and equilateral triangles inside that shattered pile? And what if we realized that the numbers of these geometric shapes were arranged according to a specific and consistent mathematical rule? What would we say then?
Then the complexion of the matter would change completely. We would call this cosmos, meaning ordered confusion. We would understand that inside those glass shards, which look completely chaotic and random from the outside, lies a hidden order and design that exceeds human capacity. The fundamental claim of today's sources is exactly this. The letter and word distribution of the Quran text, while appearing like randomly scattered chaos at first glance, harbors this kind of cosmos, an encrypted order, deep down.
I see. Then let's not beat around the bush and move on to concrete examples. The sources start with the Hamim suras. What are these suras and why were they chosen as the starting point for a cryptographic analysis?
The suras beginning with Ha and Mim are 7 consecutive suras in the Quran, ranging from the 40th surah, Ghafir or Mumin, to the 46th surah, Al-Ahqaf. The first verse of each of these surahs consists of the letters Ha and Mim. These letters are called huruf-muqatta, meaning letters that are read disjointly and traditionally considered to have mysterious meanings. For a cryptoanalyst, these letters are like a bright neon sign saying, "Look here first." Therefore, the sources describe them as coding letters used in encryption. The analysis proceeds in layers here. In the first layer, the frequencies, recurrence counts, of these letters within the surahs are examined. In the second layer, this data is connected to the sequences of abjad or ebjed. To keep it brief, we will focus directly on this second layer. For this, we must know the abjad system. This is a numerical value historically assigned to every Arabic letter. In this system, the value of the letter Ha is 8, and the value of the letter Mim is 40.
Okay, so every letter has a number equivalent. What happens next?
The next step is coding. We scan all these 7 surahs and essentially write 8 for every Ha letter and 40 for every Mim letter appearing in the text. Thus, we convert the text into a numerical code. Now imagine that extremely long code formed by thousands of Ha and Mims lined up side by side throughout these 7 surahs, converted to their numerical values. A giant number with exactly 4,002 digits emerges, and according to the sources, this giant number is perfectly divisible by 19, meaning it leaves no remainder.
One second. This is where alarm bells are ringing in my mind and surely in the listeners too, right? It seems impossible for a human to do. But why 19? And what is the special feature of the remainder being 0? I could write a text, do the same operation, and find a remainder of 5. Would that also be impossible for a human? Would I then have a miracle of 5? Mathematically, when we divide a number by 19, isn't the probability of getting any remainder from 0 to 19 equal? What's the difference between remaining 0 and remaining 5? This sounds like inventing rules that fit the result again.
This is the most correct and critical question to ask. This question clearly shows that what Rashad Khalifa did was hollow, and if the system consisted only of this single layer, that is, Rashad Khalifa's claim, the entire claim would collapse, and you would be right. It would be weak evidence. However, the sources claim that the system contains a countermeasure specifically against this weakness. This is where the second layer kicks in. In the second verse of the 42nd surah, which is one of these 7 surahs, there is an anomaly, an exception found nowhere else in the Quran. Huruf umukata letters in the second verse. This is a feature not found anywhere else in the Quran. It is found only in the second verse of the 42nd surah. These huruf umukata letters, namely Ain, Sin, and Kaf, are like a sign in the text saying, "Pay attention here. There is a different situation here." A cryptoanalyst would never skip this signal.
Okay, there is an exception here. It's clearly visible. What does this exception do?
This exception functions as a verification mechanism. We now repeat the coding to include this anomaly. Into the giant 4002-digit coding we created, that is, into the ha and memes, we insert the abjad values of these huruf umukata letters in the second verse of Surah 42, 70 for Ain, 60 for Sin, and 100 for Kaf. When we make this addition to the 4002-digit coding, the resulting new coding becomes 4,475 digits long, and it is again perfectly divisible by 19.
Hold on, did I understand correctly? A rule, an order, is noticed in the text. Then a unique exception seen only in one place in the Quran is noticed, which forms the second layer of the coding. And when that exception is also coded, it is seen to comply with the same rule. So is it essentially saying, if you think I am a coincidence, come look closely at my weirdest and most unique part, you will see the same signature there too?
Exactly that. This second layer distinguishes the 0 remainder from the other 18 remainders and gives it a special status. The sources present this point as the departure from Rashad Khalifa, from numerology, and the entry point to cryptology. Your text that gives a remainder of 5 has no such second layer within it that verifies itself. It becomes very clear here that there is intent. You have to expend effort to achieve this. This situation dramatically lowers the probability of it being a coincidence. This is not just the correct main code of a safe. It's like a second locked box inside the safe, also opening with the same code. The probability of it being by chance is much lower.
All right, this second verification layer really changes the complexion of things, I admit. But I still have this question in mind. Are the keys used by this system, namely numbers like 19 and 7, chosen arbitrarily? I mean, do the analysts choose these numbers, or does the text itself point to these keys?
The sources claim that the keys are not brought from outside the text, but on the contrary, are given by the Quran itself. As a reference for the number 19, verses 30 and 31 of the 74th Surah, Al-Mudathir, are cited. After the verses say, "Over it is 19," they state that this number will be a fitna, a test or trial tool for those who disbelieve, and yaqeen, meaning unequivocal, scientific, certain knowledge for those who believe. This looks like a promise of objective certainty that is testable, not subjective interpretation. The sources interpret this as the system's own technical specification.
I understand. The text gives its own key. But what about the 7? Where does the 7 come from, the number of Hamim surahs?
As a reference for 7, verse 87 of the 15th Surah, Al-Hijj, is cited. "And we have certainly given you 7 of the often repeated Seban min al-Masani and the Great Quran." The critical word here is Masani. Although usually translated as repeated, the root of the word also implies meanings like dual, pair, complement, match. According to this interpretation, 7 is a secondary key, acting as the double or complement of the dominant key, 19. If 19 is the main lock, 7 is like the deadbolt that completes it.
The sources even mention a clever intratextual connection between these two keys. While Surah 74, which gives the 19 key, mentions 19 guardians, Surah 15, which implies the 7 key, mentions that hell has 7 gates. So the picture of 19 guardians at 7 gates is presented as a textual clue that these two keys are not independent, but related to each other.
So, do these layers end here, or are there other findings that will surprise us?
End is not the word. The system continues by deepening. With the layer I am about to explain, you will see much more clearly the magnitude of the event and why I say a human cannot design this. Remember, we mentioned a massive structure of 4,475 digits by coding the letters of the 7 surahs. Now, using this as a base, we perform a more specific operation. This time, we scan the text line by line, that is, verse by verse. We sum the numerical values of the coding letters, the abjad values, inside each verse, and obtain verse-based coding numbers. Let's give an example for Surah 42. When we sum the values of the Ha and Mim letters inside the Basmalah, we find the number 136. For the first verse, Ha Mim, we find 48, 8 plus 40. For the second verse, Ain, Sin, Kaf, we find 230, 70 plus 60 plus 100. When we apply this operation to all the basmalahs and verses of the 7 surahs, taking the coding letters into account, we end up with exactly 419 verse-based coding numbers. And hold on tight, this new number is perfectly divisible by both 19 and 7.
Just a minute. This is truly a dizzying level. So should I understand, the same text, the same letters, they were forming that massive structure mentioned a moment ago. Now, when we group these letters verse by verse and sum them, a third giant structure emerges through a completely different method, divisible by both 19 and 7. So this is a mathematical lockdown. It's as if the maneuvering space for anyone trying to write a similar text has been completely zeroed out. So we're not facing singular findings. There's a claim of a self-sufficient system that derives its keys, rules, and verification mechanisms from within the text. So how do all these pieces come together? What we've seen so far are just puzzle pieces. What is the big picture?
This is where the whole issue gets tied together. These pieces are not independent. They are locked into each other. The sources define this integrated structure as the cryptographic structural fingerprint of the Quran. There is a very fine distinction here. Please pay attention. The purpose of this system is not to show that there is an aesthetic pattern or simple symmetry in the text. The purpose is to reveal and measure the cryptographic similarity, that is, the unforgeable identity of the text. Just as a fingerprint is unique to its owner, this structure is unique to the text. The sources define the system forming this fingerprint with 3 fundamental constitutional articles, or 3 basic principles. First, holism, integrity. The coding must cover the entire text. You cannot say, "This number didn't work for me, let me take it out." You cannot add a number from outside not provided by the text. You cannot disrupt the integrity of the text, like the hash logic in current encryption techniques. Second, sequence, dizilim. The numbers must remain faithful to the natural order of the tables, which are the digitized form of the text. As the text flows, the mathematics must flow the same way. Third, criterion, ölçüt. Equivalences are used as criteria for the measurement to be of mathematical precision. Codings must be in the same equivalence set. While 19 and 7 are not mandatory, mod 19 equals 0 and its mate, pair, or complement, mod 7 equals 0, can be used as examples. We can summarize the holistic structure of the system again in 3 main layers. First, the basmalah, the opening sentence of the Quran. The sources describe this as a cryptographic gem of incredible density. This short sentence of only 19 letters harbors dozens of mathematical rules within itself. Let's quickly examine a few.
Please, let's take this part a bit slower and in detail.
Certainly. Here is the first coding. There are 4 words in the basmalah. These words consist of a total of 19 letters, and the sum of the abjad values of these letters is 786. When we write these three numbers side by side, that is, combine 4, 19, and 786, the number 419786 emerges. This number is perfectly divisible by 19. Another coding. There are 3 letters in the first word. There are 4 letters in the second word. There are 6 in the third word, and again 6 letters in the fourth word. A code forms from the natural sequence of these numbers, and this code, that is, the resulting number 132,463,646, is perfectly divisible by 19. And when you do this coding in reverse, that is, saying the fourth word has 6 letters, the third word 6 letters, the second word 4, and the first word 3 letters, the resulting code, that number, is again perfectly divisible by 19. These codings are just 3 of the dozens mentioned in the sources.
Incredible! The fact that so many constraints are fitted into a sentence of just 19 letters at the same time is astonishing in itself. Is this just the beginning?
This is the second layer of the structural fingerprint, the Hamim codings we discussed at the start. Codings on the frequencies of coding letters in Hamim suras. Abjad sequences of coding letters in Hamim suras. Verse-based codings of coding letters in Hamim suras. The third and deepest layer, the Mushaf index, meaning the skeleton of the Quran. Even this most fundamental structure, consisting of 114 surahs and 6,236 verses, harbors complex mathematical balances within itself, like even and odd symmetry. This shows that not only the decorations of this building, but even its foundation and columns were not laid randomly. They too are encrypted.
And I suppose there's one final all-encompassing lock?
Yes, it's not necessary to call it the final lock, but calling it the holistic lock might be more accurate. This is perhaps the most striking example. Imagine writing down all the verse numbers of the 114 surahs in the Quran, one after another, without disturbing the order of any verse, without skipping any, and specifically including verses 128th and 129th of Surah Al-Tawbah. So, Surah Al-Fatiha has 7 verses. For it, we write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Immediately after comes Surah Al-Baqarah with 286 verses. For it, we write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and continue writing sequentially up to 285, 286. While continuing like this, we of course continue by writing the 128th and 129th verses of Surah Al-Tawbah as well. We do this for all 114 surahs. A very simple, natural, and understandable coding. We write all the verse numbers of the Quran one after another without any intervention, skipping, or changes, and a gigantic number emerges consisting of exactly 12,471 digits. And this giant number is again perfectly divisible by 19. At this point, the source demands that the 19ers, those who claim verses 128th and 129th of Al-Tawbah are not from the Quran, think again after this information.
This really takes the event to a completely different dimension. Think about it. The rule is so simple and natural. Just write the numbers side by side. But the result is a massive mathematical lock of 12,471 digits. So this means the slightest change to be made to the Quran's index, the order of surahs, or the verse counts, even the addition or removal of a single verse instantly breaks this 12,471 digit number. I suppose this is the biggest and most concrete proof of that holism principle we mentioned earlier. This number contains the 128th and 129th verses of Surah Al-Tawbah. It contains every single verse of the Hamim surahs. The connection is clearly visible here. So what kind of picture emerges when we combine all these pieces? What does all this mean?
It means this. None of these layers are independent of each other. They're all locked together. Someone attempting to write a sentence similar to the Basmala needs to satisfy not only the dozens of rules within it, but also its connections within the Hamim suras. Someone attempting to write a similarity to the Hamim suras needs to take into account the entire verse count structure of the Quran, that is, the index and the 12,471-digit code we just mentioned. Canceling one verse simultaneously destroys the balance of numbers with thousands of digits in different layers. In technical terms, this is called the butterfly effect. The sources define this situation as a monument of impossibility, where imitation is practically impossible.
In summary, the sources we reviewed today move the claim a similar text cannot be brought beyond subjective literary interpretations and aesthetic tastes, pulling it onto a ground testable with mathematics, a universal and objective language. It is claimed that this nested, layered structure revealed does not look like something that could be designed by a single author or a committee, especially under the conditions of 1400 years ago, over a long period of 23 years, put forth piece by piece in response to different events.
In fact, according to an analysis in the sources, attempting to imitate this multi-layered and interlocked system falls into the NP-hard problem category, one of the most difficult problem types known in computational science. Let me explain this more concretely. This is a type of problem where the slightest letter change you make to satisfy one constraint instantly disrupts hundreds of other unexpected balances. It resembles solving a three-dimensional Sudoku the size of a gigantic city. Every number you place changes the probability of millions of other squares. Even with the most powerful supercomputers available, designing a similarity of this structure by trial and error or finding it by chance doesn't seem to be possible, even in a time span equal to the age of the universe.
In that case, let's leave our listeners with one final thought. If a text displays a complexity that exceeds the known computational capacity of the universe and the design limits of human intelligence, not just with the meanings it contains, but also with the mathematical architecture formed by its letters, words, and verses, what kind of questions does this situation make us ask about the nature of information, consciousness, and the source of that information? This is a question worth thinking about. We leave you with this question, and thank you for sparing your valuable time and listening to us.